Okay. I think we can start back up now. Because it
It's
didn't
a
crash.
strange cabin in the woods that was supposedly terrifying. Generally, we did a
Everything
lot of
crashed.
research on
I
these
said I
places to
said
learn
I could
about
start
them,
now because
what other
nothing
people have
crashed. It didn't
seen or
crash.
experienced, but this time we did none of that. Found the address, printed out the map course directions and took on the road. The road is truly out in the middle of nowhere surrounded by woods. It was about 8:15 midsummer when we parked on the side of the road just as it was turning dusk. We got out of the car and headed to the trunk to get our flashlights and backpacks.
Okay, I'm gonna play it
We
safe
rounded the
and
end of the
like
car and I saw
save
the
every
cabin.
5 seconds.
I gestured to my friends to look at the cabin. Just then we saw what looked to be an orb
And then
that
I
was
would say
slowly
surprise
moving
is
towards us. It
that's
was
what
far
people
enough in the distance
that's
that
a
we couldn't
new
make out
problem.
distinctly what the
There's
shape
no one here.
was. It wasn't scary, didn't make me
I
anxious,
mean,
it did the
online.
opposite. I was incredibly intrigued and
You said what?
curious. I started walking
I
into the
said
woods,
if it can
leaving behind my
crash, check
backpack and
online
flashlight.
to see.
My friends closely
That's a
followed.
new problem.
Breaking the silence, we heard a crashing through the woods as a man appeared running towards us holding a lantern and telling us that we had to leave. We
I've
asked no
never had a game
questions and
crash.
headed back to the
I mean,
car.
I guess
The
it depends
adventure
on
was over. We were all silent and in a
within
daze
like X,
driving away.
within
Until
like
my
XP,
friend
I
said,
wouldn't think it's
"Wait,
crash.
did that guy have a lantern?
I don't know why. It's
What
fine
year
now.
is he
I
from?"
don't know why.
Still a strange, weird moment in my life. 6 years ago,
Might
I
have
was
been your
hanging
computer.
out with my siblings in our
Damn,
yard
these
during
fucking
a
people
clear,
got
sunny
fucked
day
up.
around high noon, and I suddenly caught something moving in the sky out of the corner of my eye. When I turned to get a better look, I couldn't reconcile what the hell I was seeing. It was a metal cube just gliding through the air pretty high up. I proceeded to absolutely lose it, and my sib saw it as well before it disappeared behind some trees. We ran to the other side of the trees but it was already gone. Still creeps me out to think about. We did live right next to a military base, so make of that what you will. Thing had all the aerodynamics of a little brick though. Every few weeks my girlfriend or I will catch sight of colorful lights moving past our third-story apartment window at night. I, the Scully of the relationship, am convinced it is some trick of light, with a police car's flashing lights reflecting off of something and bouncing back to our window. My girlfriend is certain that someone is flying a drone past our window to spy on us. I always run out to check as soon as I see the lights, but I never see a drone. The lights look like a drone, but they move too fast and they move through tree branches, so I don't think it's a drone. It's probably aliens though. I stole a picture from one of the historic houses in Old Town San Diego on Halloween for fun with my girlfriend.
Hey, you're so
Picture was
broken.
painted in the 1800s. It was Jesus praying in a hallway. Upon
That's a
closer
Teddy Ocean is
examination, there
broken.
was an alternate black devil-looking
Oh.
Jesus, hidden in the shadows of the painting. Took it home and put
I'm
it in the
definitely keeping this
closet.
one.
Randomly
You want me to
on
name the
nights I would
Teddy
smell the
yourself?
worst smell in the world and wake up and see what looked like a black smoke
What
cloud.
list do
I
you get
moved 3
XP?
times and still saw
Huh?
the
Let me
same
pull up
shot.
that list.
Finally my roommate saw the same thing, so I knew I wasn't crazy. Long
I
story
don't want to be a
short,
Teddy Ursa.
I brought the
But let
picture
me
back
double
to where I
check.
got it and told one of the employees
Oh,
what I did and
I definitely want
apologized
to
and
be
she
a
replied, "Don't
Makihita
worry, they always come back to us."
A Makahita.
or
Background, there's a
Do you
compound
get
near
this
where
in
I
this
grew up
game?
that is a supposedly decommissioned AT&T
that's
Cold
what I'm
War
pulling up.
communications center.
Pokemon
It
XD.
sits at the end of a dead-end
Hold
road
on.
isolated from any houses nearby. On the outside it looks like a small, mundane 2-story building. Nothing exciting at
You
all,
get it from
until you find out the
Cypher
building is actually many stories
John
deeper.
Torkin.
The entire building rests on a
Oh,
bed of springs
NBS.
to absorb shock from explosions
I'll
and
probably play
features
them.
an underground parking structure
So,
adjacent. Over the years there have been theories that it was a missile silo, UFO research center, and something about a dark cloud full of lightning hovering just above it on an otherwise clear day. The X-Files part, prior to decommission, you could drive down that road until you almost reached a guard station. I
what's
say
your
almost
team
because
gonna be?
doing so resulted in being
I have a good
engulfed in
idea
floodlights
that
with a
Makahita's not
military-type
gonna be on my
security
team.
team armed with assault rifles demanding you turn around
Makahita's
immediately.
trash.
As far as I know, no one to this
Oh,
day
it's
knows
not.
what really
Yes,
went on
it
there or what the
is.
inside looks like.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
digging a grave for a passed-on pet in the woods behind my house. I leaned on my shovel to stop for a break. I saw some kind of animal dart in front of me and leaned forward to look at it closely. It had vanished. Next thing I knew, I woke up lying on the ground and for some reason didn't worry about it. I just got up and began digging again. It was a hot summer in the mountains, so when I got weak and exhausted a little later I figured I was getting heat exhaustion. So I went back to my mom's house to cool off. She freaked out because I was covered in blood. I had a big skip mark cut on the very top of my scalp like something very sharp had skipped across my head like a skipping stone. It was in the middle of a property that backs to a big multi-county lake a mile or two back, and on other sides was just dense forest my family owned. No idea what it was. This one scarred me for a couple of months. When I was in high school, a guy and I got into an argument. He socked me in the jaw and started to fall to the floor. When I hit the floor, I instantly transported to a dinner table at which I was an adult. There was a woman sitting across from me with a toddler boy and a preteen girl. I got a good look of my surroundings. A relatively modern house, with what looked like 2 floors. I felt like I belonged here, like I had some sort of emotional connection with all the people in the room, especially the kids. Then, the woman, my wife, asked me a question. When I opened my mouth, I threw up all over the table and woke up in a stretcher in an ambulance.
Alright.
Hours later, I found out I just had a minor concussion.
You're gonna be a Gale?
For a while, I felt like I left a part of my life behind, even if it was only for a bleak moment in that world. To this day, I can still clearly remember all their faces and what the house looked like. I was sitting out back at my old place at about 4 a.m. during the summer. There were some railroad tracks behind the aft buildings. I was sitting parallel to the tracks, just drinking beer and listening to music through some headphones. All of a sudden I see something in my peripheral vision. I turn my head and see this gold-glowing humanoid figure is walking on the tracks. It looked like a human, but with no discernible features. And it was glowing gold. I had my eyes on it for about a second before it went behind some trees. It's the only paranormal experience I've had that I haven't been able to find an explanation for. Then again, I was pretty sauced by this point, so it takes away from my credibility. But I usually don't see glowing figures while drinking.
Except for Espion.
All the UFO sightings throughout history are just humans from the future on a time-traveling safari meant to observe how we were in the past. What conspiracy theory do you believe in the most? I think some memes are started by businesses as a form of free advertising. The recent Duolingo memes got me thinking more about it. Duolingo wasn't a small app at the time, but it became a lot more popular after the fact. There have been other memes revolving around a particular product or brand as well, that make me think this is happening on a strategic level beyond some kid thinking it'd be hella funny to do this or that. Marshmello doesn't actually produce his own music. My biggest piece of evidence is the creator arcade videos. He speaks and navigates Ableton like someone with only a basic knowledge of music production. He does everything number by number. Producers don't do that. You can't just instantly know that sound needs a boost of exactly 1 dB at exactly 1.2 kHz without even listening to the sound first. He randomly pauses every now and then, presumably to be fed lines. And he seems to lack even a basic understanding of music theory, recreating MIDI by randomly clicking in notes with no regard for the key of the song. Someone with the level of skill he demonstrates should not be capable of making radio quality hits. Disney released Frozen, so that it would be the top result when searching Disney Frozen, and not anything about Walt Disney's head being cryogenically frozen in the Disney theme park. I don't know how likely that is, on either count actually. Area 51 is just a front that was allowed to become popular in the public eye, but actually has nothing of value. Not saying aliens in bases exist, just saying Area 51 is allowed to be the popular secret base thing to cover up actual secrets. I am not downplaying what the airmen at 51 do, just saying that what they do now is not likely as top secret as people are led to believe. That our phones are always recording, at least audio, to target advertising of course, but more secret agent things as well. My mother-in-law talking at dinner about how hard it is to train for a marathon now that she is over the age of 55. I get ads all over Reddit and Google that read, "Over 50 and a runner?" Check out this random product. Within 4 hours of the conversation. I know there was a bunch of stuff about this, but I think every company denied it. Could be wrong though. Marijuana legalization is being pushed by Big Pharma. Once it's legalized, they will then push for restrictive regulations in the interest of public safety that will force shutdowns of consumer or small grow operations. Those are only allowed now to foster positive sentiment towards legalization. So then it's legal and they have a monopoly. Planned obsolescence, if it's still a conspiracy theory. Why does my phone suddenly develop unseen issues when the new one is released? It's not a coincidence. And who even asked for these tech companies to release a new phone every year? We
Why
live
is
in a
it
time where technology is now growing at a rather slower pace compared to the 2000s when there was rapid innovation. It's not like my current phone is getting crappier in 1 year, but wait, it is. Applies to phones, tablets, smartwatches, basically most, rather expensive, internet-connected devices receiving updates. There's a recent increase in realistic space colonization movies to garner interest in space exploration, because some people at the top know it's needed. It's actually probably so very wealthy people can get funding and support from us average losers so they can abandon the planet as soon as possible, while we suffer all the crap that was most likely caused by them. People at the top don't give a crap about you and I. We can sit on the planet and pay for oxygen as we slowly die from cancer. They want to get off the planet. Male birth control advancements are being squashed by the pharma companies who produce the female contraceptive pill because of all the money the pill generates despite it, causing so many unsavory side effects. Example, Gale, a non-invasive treatment for men that mimic a vasectomy but is completely reversible. It's been around since 2010 but can't get funding. I think it's because it is a once of, maybe more than once depending on number of kids you want, treatment and reversal and not a daily dose, so it is not a constant income. Why fund something that won't give you a steady stream of money, even if it means a healthier society? I am not talking about the male contraceptive pill or spermicide gel. This is, for lack of better way to explain, an IUD type thing for men, completely different to the male pill that has made mainstream media. It was developed in India and there are online sites for them to get funding through sponsors. This is my tinfoil hat theory, it's not based on meticulous research. That Avril Lavigne died in the mid-2000s and her record label hired someone who looked like her to take over her career. Michael Jordan didn't decide to step away from the NBA to play baseball to honor his dad or anything like that. He got caught gambling and David Stern couldn't allow the league to lose all credibility with its biggest star being suspended for betting on games. He had him take a couple years off instead of publicly punishing him. I've posted this one before, but I think that there are high-level rings of pedophiles and sexual predators specifically so that those above them can keep them under control. We know that there are kingmakers. While the big actors and musicians today are certainly talented, there are plenty of B and C-listers who could be just as big if only they had the backing of a big publisher like Disney, Paramount, etc. Thing is, making a king is expensive. You have to spend a lot of time and money getting the public to care about them before they start to pay you back, and once they're big they don't technically need you anymore. So the kingmakers are naturally going to look for people who are retainable to ensure they get their investment back. They have to. For every king they make dozens of duds. It's an expensive process. Sometimes that's as simple as them being naive. A good legal contract can lock them in for a long time, and often the only way out is to destroy your value so the kingmaker stops caring. Look at Britney Spears' meltdown for example, but if you can't get that then blackmail works just as well. I suspect that for a long time homosexuality was the go-to black mark. That's why it seemed like for so long that the big names were always having gay scandals and the like. It was easy to stage, easy to feed them their vice of choice when they were good, and not illegal, just career suicide, so it was low risk high reward. But of course the downside to making a king is that he gets a good deal of power too and eventually public opinion shifted and it became okay to be gay. Could still destroy some careers. The teen heartthrob loses a lot of his appeal when it turns out he's more interested in his very small male fanbase, but hardly enough to keep them from going solo or jumping to another label. So now they moved on to more shocking and illegal appetites. Harder to spot vulnerable marks and tougher to get them their vice of choice, but if it was easy to make a king everybody would be doing it. Someone who abuses women or children isn't about to cross their handler, they shut up and take their cut. After all, they're still being handsomely rewarded, just not as much as they could be making if they didn't have a publisher leeching out the lion's share of their profits. I don't think this is a huge coordinated conspiracy, mind you. I think that quite a few successful talent managers have discovered that sexual predators are surprisingly easy to manage if you're willing to clean up their messes for them, and that when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars you can suddenly afford high-powered lawyers and firemen who neither ask nor answer questions. But between predators gaining power and promoting like-minded monsters, and managers seeking out predators because they're easy to keep on contract, I think it explains a bit of why there always seems to be at least a few sexual assault scandals going on in movies and music at any given time. All the UFO sightings throughout history are just humans from the future on a time-traveling safari meant to observe how we were in the past. They are supposed to keep out of sight, but because of human and mechanical errors, There have been hiccups with their cloaking which have resulted in being seen. That's why there have always been so many reports of them throughout history, but there has never been an attack. It's just us. Also, the reason why we don't see as many examples of UFOs now, even through pretty much everyone has a camera, is because people are not that interested in this time period, since we already document aspects of human life all the time. PETA is ran by the meat industry to delegitimize vegetarianism and cutting back on meat. This one is more personal, but I fully believe it. Long story short, my father-in-law was good friends with a guy who was pretty high up in Boeing. Like, knew some top secret kinda stuff. Well, he ended up quitting as he couldn't take the pressure. He was a very paranoid person, to the point his was a hindrance to his life. Well, a few months after, he starts telling my father-in-law that he's being watched and followed and that the government is coming for him. Like I said, insanely paranoid. A few extra details that will be important: he drove a moped as his primary transportation and he was very overweight. Lo and behold, he comes up dead a month or so later. The official story is this: he was riding along when a hitchhiker waved him down. He stopped to pick him up, drove a few miles down the road to a secluded wooded area, pulled off the road, walked into the woods and shot himself. I shouldn't need to explain what's wrong here, but I will anyway. I'm supposed to believe that a guy with crippling paranoia picked up some random hitchhiker and then killed himself. Even if he wasn't paranoid, it's basically impossible for him to fit a small child on his moped with him, let alone a full-grown male adult. No information was ever released about the hitchhiker. No name, no statements to the police, nothing. The Earth is a zoo created by aliens, and UFOs are visitors. In Lilo and Stitch, they said Earth was a wildlife preserve for mosquitoes. While the aliens refer to it as a preserve for mosquitoes, at the end of the movie we're told that it was a lie made up to protect Earth from destruction. There is intelligent life out there, it's just that we're too primitive for any prominent contact with aliens. Aliens choose to not come to Earth because we are lacking in intelligence and technology, and that the conspiracy is that we know this for whatever reason but plead ignorance in suggesting there is life out there. I somewhat subscribe to this idea. Imagine if advanced alien civilizations view and treat us like we do the people of North Sentinel Island. India until recently did a yearly overflight of the island and also sends out helicopters to check up on them after major events like the tsunami, but we take a very hands-off approach since the islanders are so primitive. Who's to say some advanced alien civilization that views us as quaint isn't taking the same approach, and that the UFO sightings aren't basically to us what the Indian government helicopters are to the islanders? I really hope we are in a simulation. Every religion's heaven sounds like a real drag, but I don't want everything to just end. Ideally, one day I'll die, then just wake up in a room, go get a snack or something, then load up another life and go for another spin. Repeat millions or billions of times. That Princess Diana's death was orchestrated by Prince Charles. I just can't wrap my head around the idea that this guy has an affair with Camilla and gets caught. Divorce happens, and even during the divorce and after, she is doing absolutely the best, like just killing it, still in her duties, mom duties, the gorgeous revenge velvet dress, the entire world adores her. Then all of a sudden she dies in this car accident due to her driver? You know how many countless times she was driven by someone who was trained and hired specifically for the royal family. Then Prince Charles gets married to Camilla and all is right and well again in the public eye the world gets to see. Federal law enforcement bodies are working with the public and private prison industries to flood the streets with heroin and fentanyl, because they see the impending mass legalization of marijuana, and can't risk that many empty cells. A massive uptick in street opioid use in the past few years, combined with aggressive policies targeting legitimate pain patients, and cutting them off of their medications, as well as restricting doctors' abilities to treat more people with things like Suboxone. It's not Big Pharma. Why would they allow their most popular and abusable medications to be all but banned if they're as big and powerful as everyone thinks? It's not like they're hawking new treatment drugs, and the government is working hard to ban natural alternatives like kratom on top of it. To me, it all points to a concentrated effort to increase drug-related offenses to keep fines and court fees rolling in and cells filled after weed is legal. Amazon tracks people who buy Ring doorbells and then waits for those same people to buy another product. Then they send actors and actresses to deliver the next package. While delivering, the actors are told to do something cute or quirky, dance, smell the flowers on the porch, or pet a dog, so that the owners will hopefully see the footage and post it online to social media and give the impression that working for Amazon is actually fun and exciting. all the while getting free advertisement. Music feuds don't exist. They are created by record labels. Anybody who thinks Taylor Swift and Katy Perry were feuding are morons. It is a marketing stunt. Their record labels create these feuds to sell music. When Taylor fans think Katy does a song about her, they all buy the song to see what she is saying, then buy her album to find more songs that they think are about Taylor, and the exact same thing for Katy fans. They are given generic songs to sing that people just assume are about the other, but in reality aren't about anybody. Same goes for rap feuds. A up-and-coming rapper feuds with a more successful rapper to gain popularity, just as that more successful rapper did when they were coming up. All these feuds are just to sell more music. Stoned ape theory is fascinating. The possibility that our conscious thought and self-awareness was developed from monkeys eating mushrooms is so crazy but still plausible. Remember when you were a child and had a life-changing revelation on how the world works? Remember any one of the life revelations that brought you to where you are? All of your thought from that point forth was altered and now on a different path of thinking. Your reality became different and a clearing took place in your mind where you finally understood. An epiphany. This absolutely happens when you take a high enough dose of psilocybin. The theory is that primates discovered shrooms in the wild and it unlocked logic or analytical thinking in their brain, the one thing that most differentiates us. With this newfound logic came a biological shift over millions of years. It would make sense that the split happened suddenly and remained divided, since humans with logic wouldn't form social bonds with primates like that. They'd stick to their species for survival and easier hunting. That the governments of this world, and other entities mentioned in these theories, are double playing the conspiracy theories and theorists, and not only through stigmas like the tinfoil hat. I believe that, for example, if there is one huge leak by one of these guys, or maybe even by someone like Snowden, not him specifically, but someone in his kind of position, or at least someone that won't be instantly deemed a nutjob, it's in fact a decoy. You hear about the mess-ups they can afford to let you hear about, thus keeping everything in a constant state of confusion. Are they really that stupid to have that leaked? Or are they 3 steps ahead? You can never know, and that's the way they want you to be. There's a lot of things that go smoother than silk and nothing ever truly feels like it's changing. It's like, I believe they would have the manpower, the intelligence, and the stakes high enough to pull something like this off. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell notification. Share your own favorite conspiracy theory in the comments below and let me know which of the listed theories you like the most. Suddenly, a woman appears in the middle of the street, and he slams his brakes, but still hits her pretty hard. People who have seen a ghost or seen something paranormal that you can't explain, what is your story? Not so much what I saw, but still pretty inexplicable. My sister and I were at home, just chilling in the living room. Middle of the day, we're watching some daytime TV show, all very normal. I said something, and my sister responded with something like "Bath my gran." Can't remember the specific thing. Either way, my response was to laugh and say, "Oh yeah, I'll just go do that now." As we're both chuckling, a third voice joins in, laughing and saying, "I'll go do that then." Cue my sister losing her crap completely and having to literally be wrestled to the ground to keep her from running down the street in her pajamas. The reason this one sticks with me as the most inexplicable is that both of us heard the exact same thing, at the exact same time. It was clear as a bell, too, not like some hazy voice in the distance. This came from right between the two of us. As a background, we used to hear voices calling my name my whole childhood, sometimes in my mother's voice, sometimes in my father's. Always my name. Always heard by whoever was in the house. We've even had visitors look around and ask if I was going to go see what my mother and father wanted me for. Always coming from an empty room. It was just something we all got used to over time. But this was the first time I heard something speak an actual sentence, inside a room I was in, using my voice. Very odd. When I was in college, I lived in an older home, estimate 1908. No central AC, heat, or anything like that. One day during lunch I came home to take a quick shower. After I showered I hung my towel to dry over the back of a chair. Nothing special about the chair, just a normal chair with how you would imagine a towel that is hanging to dry on it. Well, as I'm sitting in my room after a few minutes I notice in my peripheral, the towel, waving back and forth in an almost violent manner, still draped over the back. Out of fear, I told George that I meant no harm, and that I was leaving the house in a minute. We named the ghost George because this wasn't the only instance. We had a ton. Not mine, but a friend I used to hang with. Friend's great uncle used to be a taxi driver in Afghanistan. He used to know the popular routes pretty well and would generally drop off tourists and regulars. One day, as he is finishing up, he gets flagged down by a pretty young tourist. He usually wouldn't pick up customers when he's about to go home, but the tourist looked distressed and so he allowed her to sit in the back. He makes small talk with her to try and lighten the mood, but she's tight-lipped and just gives him a nod or a shake when asked which direction to take. At this point it's getting pretty late. Eventually they end up in a shady area. Friend's great uncle wasn't familiar with the surroundings, not many street lights to see by, so he switches on his headlights. Even with the headlights on, visibility is poor and he can barely make out anything. Suddenly, a woman appears in the middle of the street, and he slams his brakes, but still hits her pretty hard. He recognized her as the tourist woman and checks the rearview mirror. The woman is still there, but her skin is deathly pale and she has blood dripping from her forehead. Still looking in the mirror, he asked her if she was okay and how in hell did she get in front of his car. She just stayed silent and looked him in the eyes. He checks the front of the car and the body is not there anymore. Spooked, he offers to take her to his home so his wife can call the ambulance. His house was on the way to the hospital, and they could bandage her to stop the bleeding at his house. The tourist still doesn't say anything. So he races back home, gets out of the car and starts knocking frantically on the door. His wife opens the door to a panicked husband and calms him down. He immediately tells her the whole story and starts sobbing about how he's killed someone. His wife is confused throughout the whole thing because there was no body in the back seat of the car. She made him look again, and he was shocked to see no one was there. So she comforts him and thinks he's drunk, even though he would never drink on days he would work. 3 days later he passed away. Some local elderly people in that area went to the wife's house to comfort her after the funeral. She told her husband's story to everyone that was gathered there, friends, family and neighbors. When she was finished, one of the elderly said that it was probably a spirit. Most of them are harmless, but if you happen across a malicious one, they still cannot do anything unless you invite them into your home. That story has been passed down since my friend's great uncle passed away. It gave me chills the first time I heard it. When my dad was 18 he moved out of his house, but my uncle, his brother, stayed and still lives there today. We always go over on holidays to visit, and through the ages 4 to 7, every time I went over, while I was playing I would always see a random, almost transparent like lady watching me. When I got older, about 8, they eventually disappeared. I asked my dad who that was and where they went. My dad was confused and asked me to describe her. Turns out I described my dad's mom, my grandma, who I had never seen before. He showed me some pictures and it looked exactly like her. When I was 5, and my grandfather passed away, we went to his funeral and stayed the night at my grandmother's. I was sharing a room with my sister, 6, and in the middle of the night we both woke up to the door opening, my granddad looking in, and then shutting the door. Both of us saw it and we spoke to the rest of the family the next day. No one believed us. Me and a group of friends were playing catch with cricket ball in a car park that was attached to a small train station. The car park was pretty small and tucked behind some trees. It was also super late and the trains had stopped running. The area was well lit because there were floodlights that constantly lit the car park. We were just throwing the ball as high as we could in an arch from one side of the car park to the other. There were only 2 cars there and they were both parked in the same corner, so we pretty much had the whole run of the car park. Anyway, one guy on the opposite side of the car park to me threw the ball way too high so it just went upwards and was falling towards the middle of the car park. Me and the 3 other guys at my end ran to the middle to try and catch it before it hit the ground. We were all stood with our arms stretching upwards as we pushed each other out of the way to catch the ball. We got distracted and just started pushing each other rather than concentrating on the ball. It hit the ground and made a loud sound, so we all looked at it. It bounced once about 1.5 meters and then just went straight through the concrete. It just passed through the floor like it was air. We just looked at each other in surprise. The 4 other guys who had been on the other side of the car park had seen it too and were freaking out. A few seconds after that the floodlights went out, we just ran. Looking back, the lights were probably on a timer. However, I cannot explain what happened to the cricket ball. It was so odd. I used to work at an old hospital. The unit this happened in was in the oldest part of the hospital. It was getting dark and there weren't that many people on the unit that day. I was sitting at the nurse's station charting, but I could see my block of rooms from where I was sitting. I saw the call light turn on above the corner room, which was one of the haunted rooms. My aide was by the call light phone, so he answered it and the patient said they needed the nurse. We both went to the room. I was able to see the room the whole time, but no one was in there, and it was totally dark. We were standing outside of the room talking about it. The aide swore someone answered and said they needed the nurses, when the patient came walking up the hallway from the common room. I asked her if she had called for me and she said she had over an hour ago but decided to go for a walk. I went back into the room to check the call bell, but it was broken. That whole unit was creepy. I had other experiences, especially when working in ICU. When I was 19, I started having lots of vivid dreams and fell into a bad depression. One night I was having a dream where my boss asked me to go get something from the other room. As I was walking down the dark hallway, I tripped over what felt like a brick cemented to the floor. The trip caused me to wake up in real life to a high-pitched ringing and buzzing in my left ear. In my stupor I thought maybe a gnat had flown into my ear or something. When I opened my eyes I saw the pale apparition of a little girl standing right next to my bed looking at me. I froze, then pulled the blankets over my head and rolled away. I sat in a sweat under my blanket until the sun rose. About 10 years later I had what I can only describe as a spiritual awakening. I felt led to some obscure blog where someone had written about their experience, and it was almost verbatim the same exact story I just told. Tripping over a brick, high-pitched ringing, nightmares, and little ghost girl. I was pretty freaked out, and for me it confirmed that it wasn't just in my head.
We were quite non-believers until we moved into a haunted house. My mom still was.
Wait, how did it do exact
She
same
never encountered
damage?
anything that happened at my house since she lives in another apartment. When my dad got very sick and was taken to hospital, his roommate died and he and the staff didn't notice it, until a light bulb in the ceiling exploded without any reason. A bit later my dad passed away. My mother was heartbroken, had lost all her religious beliefs. She has a big picture of him standing on the dining table, where he used to sit. Sometimes she talked to him, like if he was still there, when the grief was overwhelming. Once she had a really bad day and told me in her flat, that she didn't believe in anything after death anymore, since she always believed that my dad would do anything he could to let her know that he was okay. The next morning she called me bubbly and lighthearted. She had left the windows open overnight, and in the morning next to her husband's picture there was a little bird. When he saw her, he chirped and flew away. She believes it was my dad or a sign sent by him to tell her he's okay now. I lost my dad when I was a toddler. He died in a car accident. My parents married young. He was only 22 when he died. I was raised by my grandparents. I turned 16 and I'm the only teen I know that doesn't want to get my driver's license. I eventually get my license, and to this day I'm a very safe driver. I grew up in a rural area in WV. I was in HS before we had adequate interstate access. We always had to drive this one road between my town and the neighboring town. I was about 6 or so. We are traveling to visit relatives. Out of the blue, I asked where my father had his accident. My grandparents were speechless. They just looked at each other and didn't say a word. I asked this same question every time we neared a certain area. My question would always remain unanswered. I finally have my license. Yeah. Easter Sunday after church I drive to see my maternal grandmother. I can now drive most of the way via the interstate. My drive there was uneventful. My drive home, well, I had a problem. The car broke down. I was able to get the car to the side of the road. I was in my pretty dress and high heels. Oh, what fun. Let's look at the bright side. It's a lovely day. It's early and I'm not terribly far from home. I have to get across 2 lanes and then just a short walk to a store to call home. Something happened. First, I really was fortunate that the car broke down a few yards from where I could easily get help. Second, someone stopped to help. It was 2 college-age girls. The driver said when she saw me, she knew she was supposed to stop and pick me up. They drove me home and I insisted they come inside so I could get money to pay them. They refused the money and left. My first year in college, I lived at home and commuted about an hour each way, over hills, mountains and winding roads. There was a horrific snowstorm. I carpooled twice a week with a friend. This day, my turn to drive. Horrible roads, lots of ice. I slid into a ditch trying to avoid hitting a car. 3 men stopped immediately and got my car out of the ditch and headed back home. This may not sound unusual, but it was unusual. It was around 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in an area where you rarely saw one car, let alone have 3 stop to help. This next encounter, it saved my life. I was living in the Virginia Beach area.
I can't name you.
Interstates with 6 to 8 lanes in each direction. I was coming home from work. I was coming off of an exit and I needed to merge over one lane. I check my mirrors, look over my shoulder, and I'm ready to merge over. My steering wheel freezes. It would not budge. I'm confused and frantically trying to figure it out before I ran out of road. Then, a tractor trailer speeds by me. The truck was in a lane 2 to 3 over from mine. It cuts over quickly, and if I merged over right then, I wouldn't be here today. As soon as the truck passed, I visibly saw the steering wheel jerk, and then it was fine. I could drive normally. That's when it all came to me. My father is my guardian angel. He may not be here on earth to guide and protect me, however, his spirit watches over me when I drive. Another snowstorm, I blow a tire. I make it the shoulder of the road. By the time I get out of my car, a retired pastor stops to pick me up. He drives me to work and my boss sends someone to change my tire. I move to SC and I have a minor car accident. Elderly man turns on red and I hit him. No injuries, minor damage to the cars. A week later, I'm driving my now repaired car. Something went really haywire. The car is making weird noises and I pull over. Yep, a state trooper and tractor trailer driver stop. I wasn't out of the car yet. A few months ago. I'm driving my late husband's truck. It's about 6 p.m. on a Friday. I blow a tire. I'm lucky I get to the shoulder as I was nearing a bridge. The tow truck got a flat and I had to wait on another one. Over the course of 90 minutes, 5 state troopers stopped to check on me. The first trooper radioed his team and requested that if in the area, check on me until my tire was replaced. The 5th trooper stayed as it was getting dark. He had his lights on so he could be seen. He told me if the tow truck didn't arrive soon, he would call his team and they would change it for me. I know what you may be thinking. Nice people stopped to help me. Yes, that's very true. More than one person told me they had a feeling they were supposed to stop and help me. What caused my steering wheel to freeze up and then unfreeze as soon as the tractor trailer went by? I've had anxiety most of my life. However, I was always very calm when these things happened. The 2 times I got a ride from strangers, I felt safe. First time 2 girls around my age. The driver said she felt compelled to stop and pick me up. Second time a retired pastor. I was talking with my grandmother the night my car slid into a ditch during my drive to college. I asked her if she believed that the spirits of our past loved ones looked over us. She said yes. She was the youngest of 7 children. Her eldest sister was 20 years her senior. Her father was in business with another man. They made driving carriages. This was around 1925 to 1930. Her father became ill and died. His business partner thought he could swindle his business partner's widow out of her share of the business. The man came over late one night. He had been drinking. He was threatening my great-grandmother. She told him she was going to consult an attorney. The man became enraged. He was destroyed their modest farmhouse. He demanded to see all the documents pertaining to the business. It was thought that he wanted to destroy the records and forge new ones, making him sole owner of the business. My great-grandmother knew the documents were in a small office beside the kitchen. The man goes to open the door and it won't open. There isn't a lock on the door. The knob wouldn't turn. He tried to kick the door open. He tried to break the knob. He tried for over an hour and the door didn't budge. The man, now drunk, tired, and frustrated, goes home. My great-grandmother nervously looks through the window until his carriage is out of sight. It's very late, near midnight. The house is silent. She walks to the closed door that has been at the center of the evening's events. As she reaches her hand out, the knob turns on its own and the door slowly swings open. She lights a candle and walks into the small room. She quickly finds the contract along with a letter from her late husband. He suspected his business partner was embezzling funds. She gathered all of the papers and turned to leave the room. As she stepped across the threshold of the door, she and my grandmother, a girl of about 10, heard a deep voice whisper, "Don't sell." The door suddenly swung shut. There were no open doors or windows. There was no draft. My grandmother said she knew it was the voice of her father and that he prevented the door from opening. My great-grandmother took everything to an attorney. An audit was done and the business partner was indeed embezzling funds. His property was seized and she won full control of the business. The attorney helped to find a legitimate buyer. She had enough money to take care of herself, my grandmother and her older brother who was crippled from polio. Oh, they never had any further problems with opening that door. Thanks for watching Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell notification. Find the original Reddit post in the video description, and give the authors some upvotes. Let me know if you like the mixed voices, or if you prefer the male voice only.
Amazing me.
I suddenly hear some shuffling around and the previously hurt gentleman yells at me, "I'm gonna kill you." Late night hikers, what is the creepiest thing you have seen while hiking?
I go out for walks very late at night fairly often, so I've seen a few things. The creepiest though, happened about 2 months ago. I left the house around 1:30 a.m., and it started off as a normal walk. I wandered around the town till about 2 a.m., when I decided to go home. I was walking back the route I had came, when I noticed a black van meander down the street. Didn't really pay too much attention to it though, at first. I did pay attention though when I saw it slowly drive by me for a second time. I wasn't entirely sure it was the same van though, so I just continued walking. But this time I kept an eye out. And lo and behold, about 10 minutes later, the same damn black van came down the street again. This time I knew for sure because it didn't have license plates. Now I was fairly scared, so I picked my pace up a little bit. When the van came around again this time, it stopped in the middle of the road a few houses in front of me. I stopped, turned around, and booked it back in the other direction. I made a few turns onto different roads, and then ran right into someone's yard. I waited behind their fence, and the same van came down the street. I assumed that when they couldn't find me, they finally decided to leave. But I waited in that yard for about 20 minutes before I ran back to my house and practically threw myself through my bedroom window.
Not hiking so much as car camping, but we were way out there in the middle of nowhere on BLM land in Colorado. We drove for an hour and a half down a Forest Service road and didn't see another soul. You could see headlights and hear cars from miles away from our campsite. It's not like somebody could have snuck up unnoticed. We had 3 cars with us and 8 people. Just got done eating dinner, cleaned up, it was getting dark so we went back to the cars real quick before hitting our tents for the night. Somebody had slashed the front right tire on each of the 3 cars with what appeared to be a box cutter. Everyone thought it was a prank, but it became very apparent, very quickly, that it wasn't. All of us were beyond spooked, like panicking, scary to watch spooked. We all had spares, and one dude had a gun, so we threw on our donuts while that guy literally guarded us and got the hell out of there. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Just knowing there was some person, probably watching us, maybe wanting to harm us, makes me feel physically ill to this day.
I was about to say, because
I used to often spend my summers bouldering with my friends by a relatively large forest. That was about an hour and a half away from where I used to live. We used to spend some of the nights camping out there just to save some travel costs and time. Anyway, I think this was roughly like the 3rd or 4th time we were out there camping. My friend had left all her climbing gear in her rucksack just outside her tent, or we definitely think she did anyway. The next morning we found her boots, a few clothes, and all her chalk powder had disappeared. We figured that it could have been completely feasible that she misplaced it. Although we were quite sure that they were next to her tent, we didn't really want to believe that they were stolen.
This game is way easier than
We
Coliseum.
didn't read too much into this and just stupidly said to ourselves that perhaps she had left it by the boulders and some animal took an interest to it. I know it sounds stupid, but it was very reasonable to us at the time. Fast forward a year, we're at the same spot as usual, sitting by the tents and chilling after having some food. Mind you, it's pitch black out, and only the camp area is lit by the fire. I go somewhere a bit out of sight for a slash, and what do I see? A dude in a full-on ghillie suit laying on his stomach looking right towards our campsite. I kinda stood there frozen as this dude clocks that I've seen him and he just bolts it out of there. I don't know whether the event to the year prior was related to the ghillie guy, but this definitely has stuck to all of us. We haven't been back there since, which is a damn shame. While it did not happen during the hike, rather the camping, it was still the creepiest thing I've experienced out there. Was working at a summer camp for kids, and we went on an overnight outing. Had a cougar circle our camp from around 11 p.m. to roughly 5 a.m. It was crying out, hoping one of us would separate from the group. I stayed up all night with bear spray and a hatchet, keeping an eye on it with the other staff. Not on a trail, but walking my dog late at night. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, my dog rang her bell and I begrudgingly got up to take her outside. When she wants to pee in the middle of the night, I don't take her very far, just in our side yard. I took a flashlight with me in case she decided to poo, so I could pick it up. I'm standing there waiting for her to do her thing. She is doing the doggy walk in a circle thing. Then all of a sudden the dog gets spooked and whips around. Out of the corner of my eye I see this chick just standing there. I didn't see her walk up, I didn't hear her walk up, I just see her standing there super still. Based on her position, she had to have come from between my house and my neighbor's house. Which is odd, because behind our houses back up to a green belt. It is probably 40 degrees outside, and this lady, about 20, is in super short shorts and a t-shirt. I looked at her, told her she scared me, and she mumbled something like, "Nice night, what are you up to?" Standing there holding the leash with my dog, I said, "I'm walking my dog." Then she said, "Cool, cool. Do you know how to get into my house?" I locked myself out. Pointing to my neighbor's house. Now, I'm a good American, I know my neighbors, and this wasn't my neighbor, who is a single 30-year-old female. She hangs out with my wife, so I know her really well. So I asked her, "That house?" Pointing directly at my neighbor's house. She nodded. I said, "You don't live there." "I know who lives there." She just scoffed and wandered her way into my backyard. I followed her, said, "What the hell are you doing?" She then took off running, scaled my fence. Which, item of note, it isn't an easy fence to scale. It is a deer fence. It is a see-through fence that goes up 3 feet with cattle gate, then the top of the fence is stainless steel wire that runs horizontally. It is the type of thing that, if you weren't expecting it, you'd easily trip over, as it is extremely hard to see and not very common. Anyways, she scales the fence and ran away into the green belt. I always have a pocket knife on me and was fortunate enough to have my, unfortunately, useless dog. So I looked around my house, neighbor's house, for other people. Shined my light in the green belt. And nothing. I have no idea how she wound up back there. What she was doing. What she intended to do. But she scared the ever-living hell out of me. It was in the summer around dusk and I was camping at a remote campground with my dad. There was a lake right next to the grounds and my dad and I would trailblaze through the forest right next to the lake, because if you went far enough there was a really pretty waterfall. A few strange things happened on this hike. We found a slash pile that had a little kid's shoe on top. When we came to a small clearing, my dad had to take a leak. He faced one side of the clearing, and I faced the other, and we both clearly heard a child say, "I'm over here." My dad thought it was me, and when he realized it wasn't, we spent half an hour looking for someone. But we found nobody. After that, we gave up on going to the waterfall, and started to make our way back to camp, but there were clear sounds of something following us, twigs snapping, bushes shaking. We haven't been camping there since. I go hiking in the woods that permeate my town, sometimes so late that I get to see the sun rise out there. The strangest thing I ever saw was what I could only describe as a shanty town was built up seemingly overnight deep into the woods. Simple little hovels made of scrap metal and bed sheets and a small fire pit that someone had made out of an old tire, with the fire still burning. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was that this was well past midnight when I found this place and it was quiet as a grave. There was no one there. Someone made the trouble of getting a fire going and then left it. From the look of it, this place could hold about a dozen or so people, and yet there was nothing there but the fire they abandoned, and whatever possessions they had left in the shanties. I was walking around my neighborhood alone once, enjoying the night air and watching the stars. There was this little pond near my house, with a wooded area that had trees, a bench and a rope swing that went out over the water. I sat down on the bench to look at the stars and I heard some rustling off to my right, towards the trees.
I really want 10 years
Bears were
to be
not
in hyper
uncommon
mode right
where
now.
I'm from,
So
so
I
I
don't have
took
to,
out
like,
my flashlight and
walk
shone it around
everywhere
over there.
to-
I
Actually, I
didn't see
think I could
anything.
just get into
It
another
freaked
battle
me
now.
out, so I kept my flashlight on and my senses aware, but I stayed on the bench to mull over my thoughts and watch the sky some more. I don't know why I did that, cause that's typical horror movie stuff. Anyway, a few minutes pass and I hear nothing more, so I lean back into the bench and start to relax a bit. I'm staring up at the sky with my flashlight pointed downwards, so as not to create any light pollution, when I notice something in the tree in my peripheral vision. I couldn't tell what it was, but the branch was swaying slightly, and the rustling noise was back too. I immediately sat up and stared at it, but hadn't shown my
Yes,
flashlight at
thank
it
you,
yet in
thank you,
case of
thank you.
pissing off some huge bird or something else. I don't think I've ever been that scared. I remember my heart was beating so fast and I could taste blood. I stared at it for what seemed like forever, and it slowly stopped moving. But the shape was still there. Bears do climb trees sometimes, so I was hesitant to run away in case that's what it was. So I just kept staring at it. After a while I mustered up the little raisin-esque cojones to shine my light at the tree. It was a man. A scary man. In the tree. crouched in the tree like some silent, naked monkey. He had no expression on his face, but his eyes were open really, really wide. When my light landed on him, he started to move like he was going to come down. But I didn't stick around to see if he did. I jumped the bench and ran for the hills. I ran to my house and around to the back door and locked myself in without looking back once. I went around and made sure every window and door was locked. I even checked the attic. I never go out alone anymore. Not so much hiking as walking home after work one night a lot of years ago.
All the furries
I normally
like
got
it
off
when they rub
around
the
7
cologne in
p.m.
the
and my
Pokemon.
walks home were uneventful. However, this night I covered a half shift for someone, and worked until 11 p.m. There was a trail behind some train
Yeah,
tracks I
your
would
Pokemon,
take home
like,
to
I mean,
avoid
your
walking
Pikachu gets
beside
fucked up
traffic
other
and
game.
whatnot. I came to realize that night those trails were a lot different at 11 p.m. than they were at 7 p.m. I happened to come across a guy who was laying by his bike moaning in pain. It didn't sound like real moaning, more like a kid's fake "I have a tummy ache and can't go to school" moan. I also noticed his bike was standing up on its kickstand. It didn't make sense to me he would set his bike up properly only to fall to the ground in pain. He saw me and called out to me for help, but I kept walking and turned to make my way back up towards the street. As I turn, I suddenly hear some shuffling around and the previously hurt gentleman yells at me, "I'm gonna kill you." He hops on his bike and starts rushing towards me. At this point, I'm most of the way up the incline going towards the railroad tracks that ran parallel to the street. I haul up there, and as I get over the tracks, my would-be assailant proceeds to hit the tracks with his front tire and flips over his handlebars, hitting the ground hard. He is now moaning in pain for real, and makes genuine calls for help. I used a payphone at a gas station to call the cops and explain what happened. They get there and the officer explains to me this guy's a village idiot who does this stuff to rob people, and it's not the first time they had to pick his butt up after he biffed on a bike trying to rob someone. I told the officer he threatened to kill me and he laughed. Dude wasn't even armed, and apparently has had his butt kicked more times than he can count using that little line of his. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell notification. Find the original Reddit post in the video description below, and give the author some upvotes. And don't forget to share your own scary hiking stories. I heard my name being called, seemingly from inside the room, by a man with an unfamiliar voice. My great-grandpa was in his garage, some 30 feet away from the house, so it was most definitely not him. Welcome to the third Radio TTS community episode, where we take your comments and make a video out of them. Philip Brown wrote, "One time when I was younger, I woke up to my blanket being pulled off of me. I said what the yuck in my mind, thinking I was just imagining it. Next my whole body tensed up and I couldn't move or say anything. I just started praying and hoped I wasn't going to die. Soon my body went back to normal. After what felt like 5 minutes, when I opened my eyes, I saw this man. He was totally black, but he didn't have a real body, and I just saw his face and he smiled at me and flew off as soon as our eyes met. I have no clue what happened that night, and I was awake after I opened my eyes. I just stayed in bed, completely still. The room was beyond dark, and eventually the room brightened up a bit and I felt safe enough to go back to sleep. I told everyone and I think no one really gave it any thought, and just laughed as I said it." Cordo Maltese wrote, "When I was young, I used to play in my great-grandparents' attic. They were poor immigrants who survived the Second World War, so they were naturally hoarders, buying and collecting all the things they never got to when they were younger. Well, the attic of this house was actually pretty nice, were it not for all the stuff packed in there. Painted walls, carpet, etc. There was a slanted roof on both sides, and 3 about 2 foot by 2 foot storage holes with doors placed into the sides along both walls. In my preteen years, I would go up there and play with my toys. I had an old, barely color 14-inch by 14-inch TV that I would watch Bill Nye on. Here's the creepy part. Not all the storage holes had actual doors. Sometimes when I was up there, I had a feeling of being watched. Only sometimes, but it was always from those black rectangular holes in the walls. It got to the point where I didn't want to be up there so much anymore. The last time I ever played up there, I heard my name being called, seemingly from inside the room, by a man with an unfamiliar voice. My great-grandpa was in his garage, some 30 feet away from the house, so it was most definitely not him. I ran to beat hell out of there and didn't go back. Occasionally, when leaving the house and walking to the curb to get into Mom's truck, if I looked back at the house, I could see the shape of someone standing in the upstairs window, in the dark room. when both my grandparents were very obviously not in the house. Turns out, the last owner of the house was an old man who lived in the attic, and eventually died up there. Devilok wrote, I have a story. When I was a bit younger, like 14 to 15, I used to live in an old house built in the 60s. Our family had a dog and I had an older sister. One day I was left alone at home with my dog, as my family had gone to watch the annual function of my sister. My dog always used to just turn his head a bit and look like he's looking behind me or in blank
I'm turning
space.
Pokemon
I never
together.
used to believe in the paranormal or demons, but this changed my mind. That day I looked at the window next to my room and saw a small white face with a creepy grin, and almost shat myself. Underwater Screams wrote, when I was little, my parents booked a family vacation in San Diego at the Hotel del Coronado. It was perfect until we got there, and we realized that the hotel was haunted, and a lot of the guests came there specifically for the haunted vibe. The building was built in the late 1800s and didn't look like it had much work done since, because there was a very distinct creepy Victorian-looking vibe. They even still use the original elevator, you know, the kind that has metal bars instead of walls, a gate instead of a door, and an attendant in them because they look too dangerous to operate on your own. So when we got there we were a little freaked out, but no big deal. It's still a beautiful hotel, just not in the way we are used to. Well, we go down to the pool with our parents and he starts talking to this guy. The guy is saying how much his family loves the hotel and that they were even lucky enough to get a room on the 3rd floor. We're like, 3rd floor? What do you mean? He looks surprised and informs us that the hotel is infamous for its paranormal activity. By this point, my brother and I are visibly shaken because we are 0 days in to a week-long trip at a haunted hotel. We start begging him to book us a new hotel, but there's no way in hell he's doing that. So he says goodbye to the man and tries to distract us with swimming. It worked, until we got back to the hotel room and turned on the TV. They had a channel with a documentary about the hotel. The documentary informed us that in the late 1800s a guest did commit suicide on the 3rd floor, when her husband didn't show up for their vacation, and that there has been reported paranormal activity since. Needless to say, we did not sleep well the whole trip. I constantly felt like I was being watched and seeing shadows during the trip, but I was about 10 and paranoid, so I doubt I experienced anything credible. The only interesting thing that happened was one night, sometime past midnight, the fire alarms went off for a while. All the guests stumbled into the hallway in their pajamas, and waited around confused. I have no frickin' clue why we didn't immediately evacuate. Eventually staff told us there was no emergency and we could go back to sleep, but they didn't know why the alarms went off. Probably a normal occurrence, but it was super creepy at the time. Anyway, that's my long story about staying in a hotel that really wasn't that scary, but for some reason I thought I was gonna effing die. Thanks, bye. Feanor Anaban wrote, years ago, when I was living by myself in this tiny little apartment, I was asleep and got woken up from my sleep by a very loud male voice shouting, "Wake up," right in my ear. Now, I lived alone and the apartment was in such a place that I wouldn't have been able to hear other people outside shouting. It was tucked away in this dark little corner surrounded by trees. There was nothing around the apartment except the other apartments, and I'd never seen any of my neighbors the entire time I was there. The windows were closed and I had heard people trying to shout from outside before, but was always barely audible. This, though, was right next to my ear. Nobody was home but me. It was so terrifying I stayed up and started blaring music and opening curtains until I calmed down. Never happened again, thankfully. Nala 305 wrote, I haven't really had many creepy experiences, but I can imagine these ones would be creepy to someone who didn't know what was going on. For anyone who doesn't know, deer are pretty noisy animals. Here in the UK we have a few larger species and smaller invasive muntjac deer, about the size of a small dog. In rutting season, they tend to get loud. I remember a few years back when I used to walk with my dad in this huge forest. In autumn it would get dark pretty quickly, so we'd be walking in the fading light at dusk, through vast expanses of trees. Everything would be super quiet because the forest was quite far from roads and the ground would be covered by a layer of leaves that muffled noise, and you would hear a roar. The closest thing I would be able to compare it to would be a super throaty lion's roar. You know, it's only the deer, but it was still pretty cool to stand and listen to. The muntjac deer on the other people sound creepily like people. I lived close to the edge of my town, so the deer were all over the neighborhood at night, and we'd keep hearing what sounded like men yelling, "Ah." I'd see people from my neighborhood the day after it happened, and sometimes they would be confused as to who was doing it, and it was genuinely surprising to find out it was a tiny deer doing it, not a chorus of men creepily yelling in the dead of night. I found that pretty funny, I won't lie. Bacon Thief wrote, once when I was a kid I went into my garage to crush a can in the can crusher thing. Immediately when I enter the garage, I feel someone starting right at me. I freeze from fear and remain there for I don't know how long. Breaking the silence, something in the room falls down with a bang. I get the hell out.
Yeah.
I also used to see, I don't effing know, something run from my room to my little brother's.
Okay.
It was a weird sort of reddish shadow that had a vaguely human form, going super fast, like a blink of an eye. I'm like, what the hell? But go back to the TV. Maybe a week later my mom asks me if I ran from my room to my brother's. You were going fast. Noisy Boy 201 wrote,
I'm trying to
I actually had this happen before I moved into my apartment a month ago. Honestly don't know if it's just an electrical failure or something paranormal, and I have footage of it on my phone still. We have this china cabinet from when my family moved into our house back in 2006. It has bright lights above the glass shelves inside. You can turn it on by tapping on one of the left door's hinges. Well, only recently has this started happening by itself. My parents would turn the light off at night and wake up to find it on, asking me and my sister if we'd left it on, which we hadn't. And then one day, I was playing my guitar, and I start seeing the lights go from the dimmest setting to the brightest, but very slowly. It wasn't a gradual change, it was instant with each tap on the hinge. I eventually stopped playing the guitar that day and the lights stopped too. Dark Railroad. Up north you will find tons of abandoned places. The one that always stuck with me was an abandoned cabin I find just a mile through some thick woods near an old gas stop. I only found out about a possible cabin being out there through rumors as I had worked at the gas station for a few years. Nobody ever goes into the deep thick woods there due to the fact that there isn't much there. Unless you were a hardcore hunter, there is no reason to be back in there. The gas station was already in the middle of freaking woods, several miles away from enlarged towns. So this is my story when I stumbled across this cabin.
Liar.
It was a 2-story building, a main floor and a basement. You could only enter the basement by going around back. It was built on the side of a hill. The door had long fell off its rusty hinges when I came across it. Inside, there really wasn't much, just some rotting old furniture and broken chunks of wood.
Tall as hell.
The smell was awful. Just about every kind of animal in that woods must have taken a dump in there at least once. As I wandered around, I suddenly noticed how quiet it had gotten.
12 in his game.
No sounds from the forest even though it was all I had heard on the way over. Then I heard something that makes my blood run cold to this day. A freaking high-pitched laugh. Like a kid's laugh but at a louder than average pitch. It was there and then it was gone. Just silence again. I caught a quick glimpse of something moving just outside of the windows. I ran outside but saw nothing. I don't know what it was I saw. It may have just been my reflection in the window, but I can't be sure. Nope the heck out of there. Didn't even check the basement. Too afraid of what I might find out. Tried to learn all that I could about the cabin later on, but nothing of note. Plenty of people know about it, but almost no one seems to know its story. Creepy place is all that I know for sure. It is. Thanks for listening to another community episode of Radio TTS, where we take the stories of commenters and subscribers and make videos out of them. Thanks to every ice cream sandwich who shared a story.
She's not in this game.
You are amazing, and we appreciate you being part of this.
I'm so glad, because she's in my way. Like, sometimes I get trapped because I couldn't push her out of the way.
The night my grandmother died, I was alone at home. At 3:26 a.m. I heard something like a groan. I thought my mom came back from the hospital.
I was like, move, bitch!
But the next morning I learned this was the exact time my grandma had died. What's your unexplained story? Could be anything. Paranormal, aliens, or just freaky encounters. This happened a few years ago. My boyfriend and I have moved into a place that was 60 plus years old and kind of run down. But it was pet friendly, affordable,
she ain't got
and
no,
not
she
an
got
apartment
adopted,
building.
and she wants to stay with some stranger and not want to get home. Like, how does that
I am
work?
sure have logical explanations. For example, I was homesick and asleep on the couch. I felt someone walking from the wall in the living room towards me. I called my other half to see if he had come home for lunch. No dice. Okay, it could have been a dream. Fair. But that feeling still haunts me.
That's basically
Next time I was in the tub, I was relaxing, eyes closed, falling asleep, enjoying the moment when I feel tap tap on my toes. I open my eyes, give my feet a shake and resume relaxing. Again, I feel tap on my toes and thought, The water
Like,
dripping
don't
on my
ignore
toes is
us.
annoying. I submerged my feet into the water to avoid the tapping and resume relaxation. Now I'm comfortable and warm. No tapping to
I'm
bother
about to catch
me.
my third Pokemon.
Well, you know those cheap plastic blinds? Well,
I
someone
think I have to
dragged
fight
their
one of
hands
them,
up slash
and
down
then
it.
I could go.
I sat up
Pokemon.
like a shot and instinctively said, all right, I'll stop falling asleep in the tub. Whatever it was trying to stop me from falling asleep in the tub.
No.
Was it my subconscious? Was
I
it
know
a
one
spirit?
names.
Who knows?
This
The next time
Houndour
I
I'm
was
about to catch
totally
is a
awake and
female.
hanging out with my sister. She
Name
went
it
to the
Joe.
kitchen to see what kind of
I'm
food
naming
we
it.
had.
I'm naming all my Pokemon.
She
after
had her
rappers.
back to me, face in the fridge as I was walking into the
Or,
room.
not rappers,
Joe
She
but
spins
artists.
around and
rapper,
says,
right?
what? Confused.
Oh my
I say,
God.
what? She says, why did you tap me on the shoulder? I looked at her in the distance
17
between us from all the
plus.
way over here. She got straight out of that kitchen. I never really felt fear in that place, but I didn't love being alone there either. At uni, I lived in a house with 4 girls, Nicola, Rose, cousin Laura, and we all fairly regularly saw clear as day apparitions of each other. The first time it happened, Nicola was woken by me, and Rose in her room very early one morning. When she sat up, we left the
So I'm
room
gonna go
and
for a
closed
leap
the
of
door.
faith and
She came charging downstairs to where
Go
our
Pokemon
bedrooms were and
now.
angrily pounded on our bedroom doors.
I need some
Our
Poke-
bedrooms were either side of the kitchen, waking us up. She would not be persuaded that the
I
two
can't
of
use
us
this
had been
glitch in this
asleep in
game,
our
so
own beds the
this-
whole time. The first time I experienced it myself, I was watching TV with Rose and Nicola, and I got up to go to the kitchen. As I reached the kitchen door,
Oh, never mind. I
Rose
want to do
walked
that.
from the lobby where my room
How
and the
are you gonna
bathroom were,
be?
across the kitchen and into her own room. We made eye contact and she smiled, but real Rose was actually still in the living room where I had just left her. Another time, Rose, Nicola and I were cooking something or other, and for some reason I needed to pop out to the little shop down the road. I went into my room to get my wallet, and when I got back to the kitchen, I found Rose and Nicola tiptoeing into Rose's room. When I asked what they were doing, they both screamed. They had seen me creeping through the kitchen and into Rose's room. Nicola had followed me and seen me get into Rose's open wardrobe. Thinking I was planning to freak them out, they were trying to scare me first. Laura was very strange and, without exception, every Friday night she would get the train to her parents' house in Ipswich and get back on Sunday night. One Saturday morning, Rose and I were languishing in the living room and we heard the front door open and close, and Laura went running up the stairs crying. We followed her up to see if she was okay, and when I got to the top of the stairs, Rose said, "She's not going to be here." "What? Have you heard any doors up here?" And she was right. Laura was in Ipswich and there was nobody upstairs. None of us really spoke to Kaz that often. We were more likely to talk to Phil, her bloody awful boyfriend who stayed at the house 4 or 5 nights a week without ever contributing anything. He and Kaz once had a massive row because he insisted that he'd seen Nicola in the house, and Kaz thought he was lying to get out of making love as she actually used to call it. Laura once knocked on my bedroom door to ask if I was done with the oven, which I wasn't using. She'd gone into the kitchen to make dinner and seen me putting something in the oven and going to my room. Bless her heart, she'd waited an hour and a half to use the oven and there was nothing in there. As often as this happened, I'd see one every 3-4 weeks I guess. Rose was the only one who ever preempted it. The two of us generally got up earlier than the others, and she would often see me in the kitchen in the morning and start talking to me, only for me to disappear. So when we were actually in the kitchen together, she would sometimes touch me on the shoulder to make sure it was actually me. When I asked her what happened when she touched the fake me, she said it only ever occurred to her to do it when it was actually me. She would be spreading her toast and be talking about something and it would suddenly dawn on her that I hadn't spoken, and she would instantly know that I wasn't really there. For some reason, none of us were ever scared of this, and Rose and Nicola were real pussies about other stuff, and at the time I don't think any of us spoke to anyone else about it. I know I certainly didn't, and when I mentioned it to Rose a few years later, her boyfriend, who she'd been seeing the whole time we lived in the house, knew nothing about it. The following year, Nicola and I had a flat just the two of us, and I don't remember ever discussing it with her then. And in the moment, it never ever occurred to us to touch the figure, touch anything they were touching or take a photo. But then again, it was 2004 to 5. We weren't carrying our phones or Nikons everywhere we went. We never saw these figures outside the house. We would never see ourselves, only each other. Can you imagine? The figures never spoke, but they would interact with physical features of the house, like opening and closing doors. None of us ever saw one disappearing, as they would vanish when they were out of sight, either when you looked away or they would leave the room. Nicola and I were the only ones who ever saw more than one at one time, and Nicola and Rose are the only ones who saw them in their own bedrooms. None of us ever saw them in the bathrooms, although we would see them go in and close the doors. Rose and I are the only ones who ever saw someone who didn't live in the house. At separate times on the same day we both saw a builder-type man that we didn't recognize in a blue check shirt leaning on the kitchen counter. Rose knew he was fake because he didn't speak, so she just turned her back on him and he disappeared. With me, he walked into the little lobby of the kitchen and closed the door behind him. Phil would see them, but none of us ever saw fake Phil. So strange. My teacher told me a very similar story one time. She was in the kitchen doing something, and a couple of her daughters were in the living room. She had those cutouts in her walls where you could see into other rooms and stuff. The door opens and her youngest daughter comes inside the house. She'd been playing outside, and goes into the bathroom. Nothing weird, right? Right, until a few minutes later the door opens again and in walks the same daughter. My teacher and her other kids share this bewildered look. They'd all seen her go into the bathroom a few minutes before, and never seen her walk back out. They asked the youngest daughter if she'd at any point come inside to go to the bathroom, and she said no. She was apparently a very sweet and honest kid, would never have lied, even if there was a reason to believe she'd get in trouble. My teacher says that even though she's skeptical about paranormal things, she has absolutely no way to explain what she and her other kids saw. The fact that other people have similar experiences leads me to believe this is a real phenomenon. The first thought that comes to my mind is perhaps a glitch in reality, in which glimpses into parallel universes can be seen. I might look into it more, seeing as some aspects don't quite add up. For example, why these fake people never talk, or why you can never see yourself. I was walking home from my bus stop, and up in the sky, I saw this metallic object. The best way I can describe it is like a blimp, but it was all metal and had no undercarriage thing where the people flew it. I was in a weird state of shock, and this happened before I had a camera phone. Good cameras were even installed on phones, age of BlackBerry baby, so I ran inside to get my mom's point-and-shoot camera. I was inside for 10 seconds at the most before I gave up and went outside, and it was gone. The object wasn't moving, there was no sound, and it was lower than the clouds, so it's not like it could have hidden anywhere. I told my parents about it. They obviously didn't believe me, but flash forward a couple of years, I was riding my bike with my brother, I saw it again. More importantly, he saw it, too. We chased our line of sight of it for several blocks and then I started to see it change. All of a sudden, it started to get smaller. It looked like it was turning into a ball that just shrunk in size until nothing was left. Right before my eyes, it was just gone. It pains me to this day that I don't have video evidence of this. The night my grandmother died, I was alone at home.
Stupid.
At 3:26 a.m. I heard something like a groan. I thought my mom came back from the hospital, but the next morning I learned this was the exact time my grandma had died. I know it sounds strange, but I think her soul came to say goodbye. I was somehow relieved because I wasn't allowed to visit her in the hospital. I've seen a lot of paranormal things and had a bunch of unexplained experiences. The one that takes the cake for me is what my fiancé and I call the blackout. We were sitting in his living room one night back at his then stepdad's house. Everyone was out at a family friend's house and we were just chilling, about to grab a bite to eat, then go back into his room. He turns on the TV and we get distracted on the way to retrieve our pizza rolls, so we sit down in the living room for a hot second. Then is when the freaky stuff starts. We hear this noise I can only describe as a mix of a dog howling and a woman crying. Mind you, the nearest neighbor is probably a mile on either side and no dogs come near our house except our own, who doesn't sound like that. Dogs have voices and his wasn't this. I'm a little wigged out and I glance at the glass door leading straight from the living room to the back porch, and notice a reflection of what looks like a person standing in the open bathroom door across the way. F that, number one. I whip my head around. Nobody's there. Both of us are spooked. We go to get food and calm down a bit since we get a little paranoid due to past experience anyway. Well, F our pizza rolls I guess, because the lights in the house go out. They don't just switch off either. It's an eerie fade, like something gradually sucked out the electricity. F that, number two. I get paranoid because I feel like I heard something in the spare room by the kitchen, and I grab a sharp object while he walks up with a light behind me. We check the breaker to see if we can fix it. Nope. On. Off. Nothing. So it's something else. We figure it'll get fixed when stepdad is home. Didn't think of a street-wide issue because his house wiring was bad. Or is it just one documentary? By that moment the noises had stopped, or at least I didn't hear them anymore.
I don't know.
Okay, then we go into his bedroom. There's a window on the far wall that you see through directly onto the porch, and it's somewhat large with a moderately sheer curtain in front of it. I was the first to go into the room, so of course I see what I do because F me, right? I walk in his room and instantly lock gaze with a pair of huge reflective eyes staring straight at me from the porch. Like, human height, too big to make sense, and looking at me like I'm a whole butt snack. F that number 3. I panicked and fucked entirely off into the corner, and shortly after that the power came back on. Turns out we learned the next day, the whole road had a blackout that night. I am convinced it was not just some neighborhood electricity issue. It's one of the many experiences that mean I will never spend another night in that house, as nice as the people who live there are. I'll stick to daytime visits.
Right.
I was around 8 or 9 when this happened, and I am still 100% standing by the fact this happened, now 14 years later. I was playing in my front garden as per usual given. It was midsummer and was always fun to do so.
Have you ever seen
The friend I had
Midsommar?
over had gone home, as it was starting to get later in the evening. It was still quite light out. All of a sudden, the sky turned very gray and a low humming noise started coming from above me. To my knowledge, I was the only person out on the street at this point, and as I looked up, a disc-shaped object was up in the air, hovering around maybe 200 to 300 feet in the air. It had 3 small bright flashing white lights on it and 2 red lights adjacent to each other in the middle of the 3 white lights, which were positioned in a kind of triangle tips fashion. Anyway, I just stared for a moment and took it in, then I heard a loud buzz and off it went, into the clouds almost as fast as I blinked. I ran into my house screaming to my mother what had happened, but she did not believe me. This was the most insane thing that has ever happened, that I witnessed with my own eyes, and I cannot prove it with physical evidence. For reference, I used to work in the same factory as both my parents. I also don't drive, for a variety of reasons. I was headed into work one morning with my mother. It was about 3:30 in the morning, and there's absolutely no one else on the road. The factory is about half an hour from home, so this was in the middle of effing nowhere. About halfway there, on the side of the road, is a truck entirely engulfed in flames.
I bet that one's still yours.
No one in the truck.
Is
Every
it
part
bad that
of it
one's
is
still
just burning,
yours?
utterly silent. We kept our eyes out for a long time on the papers, looking for some sort of explanation, but nothing. No one ever said anything about a truck, no articles about it. It's been almost 4 years now, and there's no explanation at all.
Bet I'm gonna call them
My
Uber.
grandfather, mother's
Call them
father,
Uber.
passed away when I was around 10 or 11. Regardless of age, this man bought this grandfather clock and was never able to get it to work, no matter how much he tinkered with it. I remember staying the night there and finding this huge clock rather intimidating. It was very large, old, and in the worst way ominously mute, and unnaturally still. He had cancer, and after he passed, my mom visited my grandmother and they were sitting at the kitchen table visiting, and my mom heard chiming and asked my grandmother, not even thinking about it and rather lightheartedly, what the hell the noise was. It was the grandfather clock. Never worked before he passed, and lasted for about 3 months, and then just stopped one day. I guess it makes a couple little things every now and again, but
They have a
outside of
grandfather
that,
clock.
ominously mute and unnaturally still. This happened on the last day of
Because I
school
was like,
last year. So my classmates are standing outside and saying goodbye and that
You need to get
stuff.
out of my house.
After a while,
Right now.
almost everyone had left, and there were maybe 5 of us left. I saw my mom in the parking lot, so I said bye to the last people there, and walked down the
Is she in
stairs and
jail?
suddenly I fall.
Why don't you just,
Then I am on the top
she in
of the
jail
stairs
yet?
again and my friend says, "Oh,
I don't know.
look, there
We'll
is your
get
mom.
that in the next
You
one.
should
I don't
probably
know
go
if
now. Have a
She
great
should.
summer." I
Why
just
don't you
stand
try
there
to-
confused and say, "But
Or
didn't I just
jump
walk
off the
down the
bridge or
stairs?"
hang yourself from
She
a
just
rope,
looks
like,
at me
you
weird,
know,
and then
like,
I try to explain what just happened, but she doesn't believe me. To this day I think of the day time to
Jesus, so
time and wonder if I went through a time rift or if
if
I'm
that was
just
my
crazy.
kid, that was,
Thanks for
I
listening
would've
to
just
another
phoned her.
episode
I'd
of
have been like,
Radio
"No,
TTS.
I'm sorry, you're a
Finally
murderer."
an episode with
That's
UFO
it.
stories. Hit the
Psycho.
subscribe button to become part of the ice cream sandwich community. And don't forget to share your own creepy story. Sleep well.
You know what? And I feel so bad because it's like, I feel also depressed, which is
3 men step out of the bushes only 3 to
Hey, I
4
wanna
meters
see
away
you
from
do
us, and one had a
You know what I
broken
mean?
bottle in his hand,
He wants
and we
to see
started
what
running
happens.
and screaming.
I'm like,
Welcome to
that's-
another Radio TTS
that's
community
psychopath,
episode,
that's
where we take your comments from our
Okay.
previous
Maybe
videos
like
and
someone.
transform them into a new video. This episode is about weird and
That's
spooky
my
things
favorite
that happen to
touch.
ice cream
Yeah.
sandwiches. Cool Horse Lover
She did it
234
so that
wrote,
she- and it
"Just 6
came
days ago I
from
was in the
the
shower,
seat,
and the
like,
sliding door
you
to
know
the
what I mean?
shower was sliding
Like,
open a
like that
centimeter
fascination.
repeatedly, which wasn't that weird, I thought, because of the hot shower. I had to keep sliding it back so many times and got so annoyed that I said, I'm done with this, and slid the door over to the left while sliding the other to the right. The one I slid to the left had a handlebar to open it from the outside, while the other one had a hole the size of my pinky that I could pull it with. I had quadruple checked to make sure both doors would stay before thinking to continue washing, but it took not 2 minutes of staring at this door before it slid open slowly 3 inches, before picking up speed to the right with enough force to wedge itself into its original spot, while a literal gust of wind hit my face. I finished my shower as quickly as I could, and when I told my family of this encounter they didn't believe me. Jarek wrote, I've had a similar experience. Somewhere around 2011 to 2012 I walked into my great-grandfather's room who passed away in 2011, and I could have sworn that I saw him watching TV. Not only that, but I remember the TV being on. After that I ran into my mom's room telling her what I saw. Then we walked back there together and it was dead silence that greeted us. Everything was on its place. The TV was off. I am not Matthew wrote. I spent a summer in the local power plant. One of the smaller steam pipes cracked at a curve. We were working near that pipe. Ear protection was near worthless. Had those rubberish plugs in my ear as much as humanly possible. Still hearing the loud steam escaping the pipe 20 meters from me.
I don't feel like doing that.
That Space Rat wrote. I was about 10 when I was hanging out with my older sister and her friend. We were outside in the front yard when we saw one of the feral kids from the end of the street across the little street. These kids vandalized and stole anything they could. They destroyed a window well covered from our house and their parents didn't care. There were 3 women and 1 guy, so I did not know what was going on down there. He was about 5, maybe 6 or even 7, I don't know. He was hiding something behind his back and curling one finger to beckon us over. We obviously didn't go, but we just started at him while he tried to get us to go over to him. Eventually a woman called him, and he dropped what he had and ran away. That was when we went over to see what it was, and it was a board with a rusty nail in it. He was small, so I doubt he could have killed 3 girls who were older than him, but I shiver at what he would have done, and what he might be doing now. We moved and I don't live near him anymore. Ghost of You wrote. Right after my grandpa died when I was 11, I was sitting in my room just reading a book on my bed with the radio playing. It was a really nice day out, so I can't say it was the weather, but the radio station suddenly went out and turned into static, and I will stand by what I heard to this day. It was my grandpa's voice just saying my name before it went back to static and then music. It didn't scare me or anything, and I never told anyone about it, and 10 years later, I still think it was just him trying to comfort me. Ghostly Art wrote. What's creepy and explainable to me is how places have bad energy. Loved my old basement room to death, but got spooked very easily and absolutely could not watch videos like this in there, or it'd dial my paranoia up to anxiety attack levels, and I don't believe in ghosts or demons. The house was built in '76, nobody has ever died there, but being in my room in the upstairs hallway just had weird energy, where I felt vulnerable and like something was waiting around the corner. Moved to a different house recently. I hate being in the living room and the back room alone. It has that feeling of something is watching you or waiting out of sight. My room is in a completely separate building connected to the house with a breezeway, built a couple decades after this house, but nobody's died in either, and the energy in there feels light, it feels safe. I've genuinely never felt paranoid or creeped out in there, and I can watch these videos for days and feel fine. Dumb paranoid explanation,
flinch, bitch.
Bad vibes and residual energy, demons, ghosts, logical and actual explanation, literally just in my head. Amelia Ray wrote. I can't explain the noises like banging and other noises that me and my dog hear in the house that my husband can't hear. I think I see things sometimes and I try to blow it off, but my dog will be in a trance, staring in the same spot I thought I saw something, but my brain is refusing to believe anything is there and I just ignore it and go on. Totenkopfsniz wrote. Once, when I was in my room at 4 a.m. I looked out of the window, and there was an ominous white face. It had 2 black eyes and huge bottom teeth that protruded out of its mouth. I recoiled and went to the bathroom to recap. I had no idea what it could be. I was a bit nervous to go look there, but then I did. It was not there. Probably some light reflection game. To this day I'm still a bit anxious when I look out of windows at night. Pond Fords wrote. I had a dog that my now ex-warden, aka wife, Had gotten for our daughter for Christmas couple of years ago.
How am I
She
alive?
loved to play fetch with golf balls.
But you
We would roll the ball down the
else.
hallway or across the kitchen and the mom would chase after it, get it and bring it back to us.
I
Well, the
like
ex-warden decided she doesn't love me anymore and moves out, taking about 90% of my crap, my daughter and the mine. So now it's just me in my childhood home.
Yeah.
Oh well. Well, one night I awoke to the sound of a golf ball being rolled. It makes a distinct sound so there's no confusing it. I laid in bed to make sure I was not having a dream. I hear it several more times and then nothing. I get up the next morning to find a golf ball in the hallway. I pick it up and put it in the kitchen. I go to work, come home, eat and then go to bed. Only to be woken up by a damn golf ball rolling sound. I get up in the morning to find the ball back in the hallway. I grab it and bring it to my dresser and toss it into the top drawer. Do my routine for the day and then the one for the night. I go to bed. Then yup, you guessed it. Roll, roll, roll. I had it in this time. I'm gonna do something about this. I get up in the morning, find the damn ball and throw the mofo as hard as I could into the woods. Ha ha ha. Let's see you all get it back this time. I do the routines and go to bed. If you guess I had a good night's sleep. Wrong. Mofo roll, roll, roll. This time I go out into the hallway and I see a different golf ball this time. It was one I got a long time ago but forgot where I put it. I said F this. Cause I had worked at a golf course for a couple of years ago and there's no telling how many golf ball I had brought home and now I'm some box somewhere. I go back to bed. This has been going on for the last couple of years. And I have gotten used to it. I don't even pick the damn golf ball up anymore. No use, so I just leave it and hope who or whatever is playing with the golf ball stays content with it. I really don't want to have to deal with anything else. Wrote. One time I was in the subway rushing to school. The train goes extremely slow, then stops for a solid 5 minutes. I constantly check the watch, the time is passing. Finally, we move and arrive at the station. I go out and look at the watch again, not even 1 minute passed. Still don't know what happened. Looks like time stretched in the tunnels. Norvertal Bowman wrote. I once saw my cat under my bed only to realize the door was locked. I also noticed the eye looked too gray, and it was the left eye, so that would mean the other eye was within the wall. Another time when I saw